Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of News Dose, where I give you all of the latest gaming news, and we have a lot to cover today. Over the weekend, Sony held a hands-on PlayStation 5 event where different Japanese news outlets and YouTubers were able to test the PlayStation 5 out for themselves. It was an interesting little setup that overall had some pretty good impressions, and we're going to go over all of that here in just a bit. Also, it sounds like Xbox is prepping for another big month themselves. They did reveal some hints to something possibly being planned for later this month, and we may be getting one last event before the Xbox Series releases, so stay tuned for that as well. First though, let's go over some of the other news, starting off with Crash 4. So Crash 4 has been a game that fans have been asking for more than 2 decades. That is a long time to wait. Now, to be fair, there has been other Crash games that's released over this period of time, but for the most part, they weren't really near as good as the original trilogy, and oftentimes, they abandoned what made these games so special in the first place. It really wasn't up until 2017 that Activision finally figured out that the original Crash formula was more than good enough, as the Crash Insane trilogy was a huge success. It was so successful that Activision was convinced that they could do a direct sequel to Crash 3 and continue on with this legendary franchise. Why am I telling you all this though? Well, the first weekend of Crash 4 was not particularly as successful as many were probably hoping for, or at least at first glance. Over in the UK, it has been reported that it was the #1 selling game, selling slightly more copies than Star Wars Squadrons, but unfortunately, Crash 4 sold 80% less physical copies than the Insane trilogy. That sounds kind of rough, though I do think it's important to note here that this is just the physical sales, which is important because digital has been rising dramatically over the last year. So I do think that this number is a little misleading. Digital sales will probably make this number look much better, but you know, there is another reason that sales could be a little down. I know some fans are not super happy that Crash 4 is a $60 game, whereas the Insane trilogy and Crash Team Racing was $40. So you have to take that into consideration as well, and this may have been an oversight on Activision's part. Maybe it should have been $40 as well, but one thing is for sure, Crash 4 is an excellent game, and if you like the Crash franchise, you're probably going to love this game. I bought it right away because it's a quality game, and it's exactly what I wanted out of Crash Bandicoot, but I know everybody is a little different on this subject. What I will say is that I do think that the 80% decrease number is misleading, and I would really like to see how it all stacks up with both digital and physical sales before I make too many assumptions. Now, I do have some good news here. CyberPunk 2077 has officially gone gold, which means there will likely be no more delays for CyberPunk. It will release on November 19th for the PC, Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4. Keep in mind that it will also get free upgrades for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 at a later date, but there is no official confirmation as to when just yet. This is great news for gamers though, because this is probably going to be the biggest release of the entire year. There is a ton of anticipation for this game. I mean, CD Projekt Red is the studio behind what many believe to be the best RPG of all time, The Witcher. So yeah, there is a lot of anticipation for this game, and it's releasing just 1 week after the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 releases. While they won't be natively supported on those platforms yet, they however will be playable on both, and as we're already seeing, backwards compatible games will perform better. This has been proven with the Series X to the point several games double their frame rate and load times dramatically decrease. We haven't really seen what the PlayStation 5 will do with backwards compatible games just yet, but we do know it has a boost mode, so I expect improvements there as well. Either way, CyberPunk is now gold, and that's great news. I know there has been some controversy surrounding this game due to crunch culture, and that's an important ongoing conversation among the industry, but this is something for the team to celebrate here. Going gold is a very big deal, and this is something that they have worked on for many years, and hopefully, all of their hard work pays off here. Moving on, a game we talked about last week on the channel has now officially been announced. Yes, the Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remaster was indeed a real thing, and it will release for the PC, Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4 on November 6th. Yeah, you're not even going to have to wait long for this one, and don't worry Nintendo fans because the Switch wasn't left out this time. It will release on the Nintendo Switch a week later on November 13th. I don't really know why there is a week delay here with the Switch version, but if you're a fan of Need for Speed games, you're probably excited about this one. Hot Pursuit is one of the better Need for Speed games, and visually, it still looks pretty good. I was looking at some comparisons earlier, and the new ones does look overall better, though the changes don't seem overly dramatic either. As I've said countless times on this channel, I'm not huge on simple remasters, and I much prefer remakes, but I have to say, Hot Pursuit on the Switch does sound very attractive. It'll automatically be one of the best racing games on the Switch as long as it doesn't have technical issues. What I wouldn't mind seeing though is a remake of Need for Speed Underground. That's really the games that catapulted this franchise into popularity, so if they're going to return to these old games, those might not be a bad idea. In other news, let's talk about Xbox as they're already starting off October with a bang. Of course, last week they released Doom Eternal into Xbox Game Pass, and apparently this has been huge for Doom Eternal. Oftentimes when we talk about Xbox Game Pass, we always rave about how good of a service it is for fans. That's the thing though, when it comes to Game Pass, the reason developers support Xbox Game Pass so much is because they get something in return as well, and Doom Eternal is a prime example of just that. Since Doom Eternal released on Xbox Game Pass, it has saw a 10 times increase in player base, which is absolutely insane. I mean, it does make sense considering Xbox Game Pass now has 15 million subscribers, and Doom Eternal is a big release, but this type of stuff seems to happen more often than what you would think. Crosscode and Descender saw similar success on Xbox Game Pass, which is a very big deal for small independent games. The reason as to why is because it vastly improves word of mouth, and not only will they sell better on Xbox, but it improves sales for other platforms. I mean, I would have probably never played Crosscode if it wasn't for Xbox Game Pass, and I've now talked about that game in several videos, including top 10 lists. So that is a very big deal, and we're seeing it once again with Doom Eternal. That's not the only Xbox news though, because they released some new stats today revealing some success they've had over the last year. It's all very impressive where they're breaking records, their first-party lineup is doing incredibly well, and just a lot of good stuff like that. The thing is, they're kind of teasing something big for the month of October. It's a weird way to tease this information, but they did go on to say that fans should look forward to some Xbox Series S and X gameplay, and a full list of optimized games launching with the Xbox Series. More or less, it does sound like they have some kind of event planned, or at the very least are planning to drop some gameplay videos over the month of October. See, Xbox has been doing a great job with the launch of Xbox Series. Their messaging has been great, they have the most powerful console at a good price, they have the most affordable but still viable console, Xbox Game Pass is incredible per usual, their backwards compatibility sounds phenomenal, and they have improved their first party dramatically. The one area that they could improve though is by showing actual gameplay on the Xbox Series X. I mean really, we're only 1 month away from this thing releasing, and we haven't seen a lot of actual gameplay. But it looks like they're finally going to fix that problem, and I do expect it to look great. I want that Xbox Series optimized list though. Now let's move on and talk about the PlayStation. It was a very busy weekend for PlayStation as they held their own little event for Japanese news outlets and YouTubers. This was kind of similar to what Microsoft is doing with the Xbox Series X, but in a little more of a controlled environment. They didn't send the PlayStation 5 to people's houses, but instead brought different people in to get a hands-on experience with the PlayStation 5, and overall seems to have impressed most people. Now there wasn't anything mind-blowing that happened here, as they mainly showed Astro's Playroom, which does make sense. That's a good way to let people feel the new DualSense controller features. You did see some people blow into the controller once again to do different things in the game, which looks about as silly as it sounds. I'm personally not a big fan of that feature, but I am interested in those adaptive triggers which everybody seems to continuously praise. I really want to test that out for myself. The new feature that did get shown with the DualSense controller though is the light indicators that shows which player you are on the PlayStation 5 if you have multiple controllers hooked up. I actually like this. It's nothing really major or anything, but it's a nice touch. The big news coming out of this little hands-on event though was how quiet the PlayStation 5 was. If you have a PlayStation 4 Pro, you probably know it's like having your own little jet plane in your house. PlayStation may not have Flight Simulator, but it's basically an airplane all on its own. I kid, of course. Well, the good news is that the PlayStation 5 is apparently very quiet, which is a big step up for the PlayStation 4 Pro. I think that should alleviate a lot of fans worried about that. Now, if you're from Japan, there actually was one huge announcement here. There is a new report that the circle button will no longer be the confirmation button in Japan, but instead it will now be the X button. That probably doesn't sound like a big deal for most of the world, but for Japan, that's going to be a very big change going forward, and I expect quite a few gamers to take a while to get used to that. I really don't know why they changed that, but if you're from Japan, let me know if that change bothers you at all, or if you think it's no big deal. Anyways, we do have one last topic, which I'll cover briefly. We talked about this a month or so ago, that Ghost of Tsushima will be getting a free multiplayer update. This does sound like a pretty big expansion, and we now have an official release date. Yes, it will be coming to the PlayStation 4 on October 16th, so that's right around the corner. It is a cooperative experience that has 2 story missions, 4 survival missions, and Raid will be following that. This will be interesting to follow because it was a very successful story-driven game, but here we're seeing them try something completely new with multiplayer. I mean, if it does well enough, maybe they can support a lot more post-launch, so we'll see what happens there. I do think it does look very good, and Sucker Punch has proven they can make great games, so I'm really optimistic. And again, it releases on October 16th, so mark your calendars. Anyways though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.